Hello and welcome to the Security Collective podcast. I'm your host, Claire Pales, and today's guest is Simon Jones. After a checkered early career, Simon settled into corporate technical and leadership roles in around 2000. The problem space of financial services drove a shift in focus to information security, and he completed a master's degree in 2017. This served to fuel his passion for solving complex problems with effective communication, and he continued to work in banking as a cybersecurity consultant and to develop and deliver learning material for students in cybersecurity. Simon, I'm really pleased to have you on the podcast today.
Morning, Claire. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So I've just mentioned in your bio that you create and deliver learning material for students. What sort of courses and classes are you currently teaching and developing curriculum for?
There's been a couple of different sort of focus that I've had. One is master's level courses, very much based around industry certification, so quite specific scopes of subject matter. And in the undergrad space, the courses have been mainly sort of introductory first and second level cybersecurity courses, introduction to cybersecurity, some practical cybersecurity topics, which sort of follows on from the introductory stuff, so very much aimed at sort of first-year students and second-year students, and also some slightly more advanced stuff, a little bit of cryptography, which is sort of one area I'm quite interested in personally.
So you've been working on these types of curriculum for a while, as you mentioned, and you mentioned that they're sort of based on certs, but how do you bring the content together for a curriculum in its totality?
It's a matter of sort of trying to tell a story about what the focus of the subject is about. So, we have sort of generally a 12 to 14 week curriculum, which we structure things around, and obviously, cert courses especially can be quite focused over a single week, ending in an exam. So to sort of, structure that in a sort of a 10 or 12 or 14 part delivery cadence, it's about really sort of breaking it down into, really a story about what's this subject about? What are we trying to get from the subject? How is it going to contribute to your professional development? What about the cybersecurity industry is it going to illuminate for you? And then just sort of, depending on the level of the students, obviously master's students have a different approach to the learning curriculum than undergrads do. Undergrads, it's much more about a gentle lead-in, starting to build up with some more complex topics, and then really bringing it all together towards the end of semester where it's, okay, so now we've done all the basics, we've learned 5 or 6 fundamental areas, let's bring them together in a practical assessment or some sort of assessment piece where you can draw on all of those previous topics we've done and try and bring them together in a way that might emulate something in the workplace.
When you do come out of a university degree, even with a master's, it doesn't necessarily make you job ready. And so how do you align your teaching and the curriculum with real world challenges, real world opportunities, and so that the students walk out a little bit more worldly, if that's even possible? How do you do that alignment within the teaching space?
Yeah, look, it's challenging in any sort of short time frame to achieve that. I think one of the challenges we face when building a subject within a larger curriculum is you've got, especially undergrads and master's students, you have them for a couple of years. So over that time, you'd like to try and put together, a cohesive whole that guides them through that process. It's a fairly long time in anyone's career, and it enables you to, if you have influence over that whole time, it enables you to really sort of shape the messages and the experiences and try and bring as much of the real world into the classroom as possible. To that end, I think the institutions generally across the board, certainly in my experience, have spent a lot of time and energy over the last few years really bringing the professional and the academic worlds together. So they get professionals who have an interest in teaching to come on board and act as teaching staff or mentors, help create curriculum as I do. But also from an actual day-to-day teaching perspective, I think one of the things that really resonates with the students is, we cover topics that are quite academic in focus, a specific topic in cryptography, for example, which looks great in a textbook. There's lots of texts out there, lots of sort of raw data and stuff that you can consume. But then adding to that sort of anecdotes from the real world, where might you see this topic? What are some challenges I've personally faced when trying to work with this topic in the real world? And those sorts of real world stories really help the students link what they're learning in the classroom to what they're likely to see once they graduate.
I think you make a really good point about the fact that you are a consultant and you are working as a security architect, and you're experiencing every day how our industry is evolving and the challenges that businesses are having. And so you're not simply coming at it from an academic perspective. You actually have your own, war stories, if you want to call them that, to apply in the classroom as well.
Yeah, and look, I think that's something, in a couple of years when I first started the teaching process, I really was lost from an academic perspective. I'd done the master's degree, and that sort of gave me exposure to the sort of processes and structure that a degree would follow. And so I tried to emulate that as best I could, but I wasn't a teaching professional, but I did have quite a few stories to tell from what I'd experienced. And I found in the early days when I'd get student feedback, which I think as a member of teaching staff is really valuable. I try and encourage students to be as brutally honest as they can possibly bring themselves to be. And the feedback was, universally, it's really great to hear how this relates to the real world. And I found that was just one thing that really, really clicked with the students. They're really thirsty, not just for knowledge, but to sort of plan their futures. Where is this going to take me, and what am I going to do with this stuff? So, and that's not universal. Not every student has that sort of mindset, but certainly the good ones do, and quite a few do. It's heartening to see, even in the undergrad cohorts, so many students coming through are really keen to not just learn the material, but to hear the stories and to work out what the real world's like.
The point around them planning, a lot of your students I would expect coming in to do a master's would be coming back in from industry and, having worked. And what's your opinion around the difference between these young graduates who, as you said, come out of a bachelor and straight into a master's, or those that are maybe of mature age and have worked out in the world and have sort of seen some of the challenges, maybe not necessarily in cyber, but in other vocations? I mean, how do you see the balance between those that don't have any industry experience, I suppose, and those that do? Do you sort of see that they work well together? Do they sort of prosper better within the studies?
Certainly have. My early experience was mostly with returning students, so mature age, a lot of technology professionals, or some completely from outside the technology realm, who just took an interest in technology or security from some project or experience they had worked on. But look, I think universally students who are more mature and who have coming from a sort of working background, generally they're more structured, they're more dedicated to what they're doing, they're more focused, they can manage their time, and they're certainly more attuned to what's required to achieve their milestones, their assignments, their study routine, etc. They definitely show a better aptitude for that sort of thing. Haven't had a lot of experience personally with direct to masters from undergrad, but my experience with even third-year undergrads, even the really good ones, is my advice to them would always be get out and live the experience first, and then decide whether further study is what you need. I think the more effective master's students I have worked with have absolutely been students returning to study after experiencing time in the workforce, and some of the really core skills of what makes a professional successful as well as a student successful, things like communication, your own ability to research problems, to make relationships, build relationships with people who can assist you. They're sort of second nature to someone who's been in the workforce for a period of time. So they just come with those soft skills to the study curriculum, and it serves them really quite well. So definitely, I think the advantage is definitely for students to come back to study after some time in the workforce.
And when you're out in the workforce and you're trying to decide the type of study that you want to do, and you might be biased because you've got a master's and you teach masters, but obviously there's lots of industry certifications out there for most vocations, but particularly in cyber, it feels like there's plenty to choose from for professionals if they want to get a certification or if they want to get a master's. I mean, where are people better off spending their time, and is there sort of a process you go through that you could make that decision as to whether or not to do a master's or go out and get a particular certification?
I think first and foremost, there's certainly certificates and there's certificates. There's definitely some very good, thorough bodies of knowledge. And I think the difference mainly is that a certificate is definitely a finite scope of material. There's a brute force acquisition of facts over a fairly short period of time. And if you're looking for that, if you're looking for a skill up in a specific area, then a cert isn't a bad way to do it. It's a fairly economical from a time perspective. They're not cheap. Most certs, especially if you do the training with them, can be quite expensive, certainly the good ones. And there's also an ongoing investment. If you look at the CISPs or the CISMs or the more sort of professionally oriented certs, you then have an investment in ongoing self-education in order to keep your points up and keep yourself certified and in good standing with the various societies that run them. So it's not a bad option. I think it suits many professionals. In terms of a master's or a more in-depth curriculum like that, it's a different experience. You're talking about 1, 2, or 3 years of wanting to hopefully immerse yourself not just in the academic side, the facts and figures from the texts, but also to connect with the academics and professionals you'll meet who are teaching. You're going to be doing multiple subjects, potentially on different campuses, and really availing yourself of all of that material and sort of exposure that you'll get during that time. It's probably a bigger commitment, I think, and certainly I think not to be taken lightly. I started my master's in 2010 and didn't finish till 2017 because I worked all the way through, had young children at the start who weren't so young by the end. But it was a really big time commitment and a lot of evenings, a lot of weekends. And I sort of did one subject per semester so I could really get into the material. And I was so definite about making that career change into cybersecurity. I really wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything. So I focused as much as I could. But a different experience depending on what you're looking for. And I think it depends a lot too on the individual. Some people really thrive in a more sort of structured multi-year academic approach to learning. Others are very good at self-study. They're very good at keeping their own skills and experience up and can just use those sort of stepping stones of the certifications to build or enhance that sort of finite scope of knowledge that the certification promises. I don't think there's a perfect answer. I think it depends on the individual. And there is also a thing, I think, as what we like to sort of call certification junkies. More certifications don't mean a better professional by any means. And that's something I haven't interviewed for some time. I work for myself now, but when I was interviewing in a previous life, there is certainly a type of budding professional who will certify themselves, again and again and again. And look, it's great to see from a prospective employer's point of view a potential candidate who is active in self-education and enhancing their knowledge and keeping themselves fresh. But there is such a thing as trying to sort of push that too far. I think one should be judicious about what you do. Don't waste too much time. Head in the books. There's a lot to be gained just from getting out and living the experience too. So,
yeah, I definitely agree with you that when I look at resumes, if I'm doing hiring work and I see lots and lots of different certifications, I mean the certs these days too often are quite specific in the skills or the understanding that you'll take from them. And so if people are doing a lot of them, it concerns me that they're maybe not necessarily focused on a particular area of cyber and therefore maybe not right for the job that I'm hiring for as well. Like it's one thing to have a certification, but if you're just going out and getting all of them, it's sort of a jack of all trades but a master of none, if that makes sense.
Totally agree. And certs are generally capped off by a multi-choice exam, which again is a great way to test in a certain pressure type situation, which again doesn't suit all people. Some people love exams, some people absolutely hate them, and it's not a reflection of how they'll perform in a workplace sometimes, so not a great indication of their aptitude. But that really isn't reflective of how one operates in a real environment. You don't spend your life filling out multi-choice questions. You spend your life sending emails and reading body language and talking to other professionals and trying to nut out complex problems. So having the time in an academic structure sometimes gives you that experience similar to a workplace, but again, real world experience. I think there's nothing like it.
Yeah, I actually have done some work as an industry advisor for some Capstone years with one of the universities here in Melbourne, and the students came together in groups of 5 and they were given a real world problem that had been sent in by a company to be solved. And so obviously as IT students, they had very specific skills that they'd learnt through university, but this was forcing them to really think outside the box and think about marketing and think about people and think about the impact of this particular problem that they were given from industry. And I loved this idea with Capstone that it was free of textbooks and it was free of format, really. It was just, here's the problem. This is a real world problem. You have to solve it. Here's your client. You have to deal with that client. And it was such a rich experience for the students. because it took them totally out of their depth and showed them this is what it's going to be like when you step out and you become a consultant at a Big Four, or you become an analyst at a bank, or it really showed them what it was going to be like, which, when I did uni 20 years ago, it wasn't like that. When you stepped out the other side, you weren't necessarily job ready.
Absolutely. Yeah, the 20% paper, 10% paper, 50% exam, all very regimented and structured and traditional. It's the way universities ran traditionally. And I think it suits some professions, but probably less so today maybe than once upon a time. But certainly technology and security is such a fast evolving field that you really just need to drop the students fairly quickly, I think, in their careers, in their study careers, into a real world scenario to say, okay, this is how it's going to be. Let's freeform this. It's not structured. There's a vague overview, a framework to follow, and there's some milestone dates, as you would have in any real world scenario. But yeah, let's work as a team and with some guidance from one of the academics to solve a real world problem. I think it's really valuable.
And to your point about the industry evolving, I'm interested to know, given what the students are going through now, the type of students, the number of them, these capstone subjects, and the way that we're learning now, because there's always chatter about the skill shortage in cyber, and I've talked about it on this podcast a lot over the last few years. Do you think that what we're teaching at universities and what the students are actually taking on board and taking back out to industry, are we getting the skilled workforce, do you think?
The most important thing from what I've seen, especially the couple of years working with undergrads, is the level of passion in the kids that are coming through. And I probably shouldn't call them all kids because some are more mature age, but the majority are sort of 18, 19 or even younger. There's some really keen and quite remarkably experienced, and I use that term loosely, as in they've wanted to go down this path throughout their teens, and they've actually spent time building machines at home or doing the research and following podcasts and all the sorts of things that you'd advise a professional to do. So, absent education, you've definitely got a groundswell of people who are incredibly interested in the topic. And my first year teaching a couple of years back, I was really blown away by, I think I had a cohort of about 47 or 48 students, and at least half of them were mind-blowingly passionate about it, which blew me away. I was sort of more expecting the 10, 15% mark to be dedicated. So certainly there's passion there. In terms of content, look, I think there's certainly some catch-ups going on, and I don't think I've seen the perfect. I'm not sure what the perfect study pathway is at this point. If I did, I'd probably patent it and start my own university. But look, I think they're doing an admirable job in really trying to adapt to what the industry needs. There's a lot of industry partnership going on. You'll have internships and graduate pathways now are becoming the norm across many institutions. La Trobe has a fairly good one that I've actually had one of my students graduate recently and is working now at ANZ. She went there as an intern and loved it, and they loved her, and now she's kicking goals, and actually had her back recently to do a chat with my first year students again to try and show them that there is not just light at the end of the study tunnel, but there are mechanisms within the system they can leverage to actually find themselves contacts within the industry using those mechanisms. And the unis have been very active in doing that, I think, which is great. It's a real feather in their cap. So look, I'm confident. I think there's certainly the people. I think there's the desire both in the industry to partner with academia and within academia to partner with industry. Just, the momentum needs to be maintained, and they need to keep changing. I mean, the last 18 months has shown us how volatile the world can be. And there's quite a disparity, I think, between the institutions and the curriculums of how ready they were for the transition to what was, for a while at least, fully online learning. So I think that's a big thing to be careful of too, is the learning format, the assessment formats. Again, the examination at the end of the semester, is that really the best way to examine things? So there's work to be done, but I think most institutions that I've had experience with are actively doing that work to try and make sure that they're finding students, they're encouraging those students not just in their academic studies, but also in their career pathway, connecting with industry, and encouraging them to get out there and look at the next step beyond the study. So I think we're in a fairly good place. Time will tell, but I'm happy to be a part of it. It's been great fun. I really do enjoy it.
Oh, that's great news. And I think the evolution in this space will continue, and, that knowing that we've got thinking like yours and applying it to master's degrees and making sure that we're keeping our students up to date with what's going on in the world is incredibly important. And I really want to thank you for your time today, Simon. I think it's a really great path we're going down in terms of educating people, encouraging people to go back to study and continuous learning. So thanks for your time, and I'd love to have you back on the podcast in the future to talk about how things have changed. Once again, we could do that tomorrow, but in the future, see how curriculums are changing and shifting. So thanks very much.
No worries at all. Thanks for having me on. It's been great. Good chatting.
Thanks so much for joining me today. If you want more information on any of our guests, head to thesecuritycollective.com/podcast. This podcast is produced by East Coast Studio. I'm Claire Pales, and I look forward to seeing you next week.